Hello and welcome to a very special How I Paint Things. Now today we're going to tackle the vehicles of the Deutsche Afrika Korps, who were sent out during the Second World War to assist the Italians in North Africa. Painting these vehicles is a bit of an interesting one because the idea of a correct color doesn't really apply so much in their case, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. All of the paints will be listed in the description below. This one's going to be nice and simple, and I'll also include down there a recipe for painting tracks if you want to paint your panzers and what have you in this same color scheme. So, let's get started. So the first thing to do once you've got your vehicle assembled is to go ahead and prime it. And here I've used skeleton bone from the army painter. There's not really a correct answer to this. If you can get desert yellow from Vallejo, it's called a fantasy color, but it's actually a direct copy of green ochre from their model color range. Lovely and confusing, but that is as close to the officially correct sort of mid-war yellow that you're going to get. But the Desert War, things got a little bit interesting, let's say. So no matter how you choose to prime your miniature, I'm going to start off here with Iraqi Sand. Nice big brush. You see this goes on fairly well over our middling sort of bone color. Now, interestingly enough, the vehicles that were shipped over from Germany, they arrived in the desert in their factory gray at first. So, yeah, you do figure out that having a great big gray vehicle on the horizon is not necessarily what you want in the desert. So crews were ordered, start painting these things in desert yellow. But when you have to prioritize boots, bandages, and bullets, paint is something which is in short supply. So the Germans would end up painting their stuff with what they were sent. They did get some yellow paint through, but also quite a bit of Italian and some captured British stuff. So if ever you do want to paint a German vehicle in all of the colors of a British vehicle, that would technically be accurate. I have heard legends of a tiger that was painted up using captured American olive drab, but I haven't seen anything more than, I think, really just a legend about that, so probably not one you want to do. And of course, it bears mentioning, anything I'm going to do to the hull, I will as well do to the turret. Now, luckily, Iraqi Sand will cover really well over skeleton bone, so that's all in one coat. Any areas that you do need to touch up, of course, you can then come back and give it a second, but that's half the reason why I've chosen a bone color. If you can't get Iraqi Sand, you're struggling to find Vallejo stuff at the moment, Citadel's Morghast Bone is a super close alternative, like indistinguishable, and it won't matter. What we want to do now is to add some shading to this. So what I've got here, this is Soft Tone from the Army Painter. I'm going to pop onto my little palette here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 drops of that stuff. And then a really handy, I would never have thought of this until somebody actually showed me. Just having a little bottle, a dropper bottle full of water. Because I often think to myself, ooh, have I got the right mix there? Man, just put some water in there. So 10 drops of soft tone and 1, 2, let's go 3 of the water. Mostly, I want to change how this flows. I don't really want to get rid of the color because that's pretty much perfect. But if we thin it out with a medium, what's going to happen is it will retain that slightly gloopy quality. And I want this to flow a little more freely. So we'll put the turret aside and let's go ahead and start applying this over our vehicle. I think you'll see that a little bit of water really helps the flow and does stop it settling too much on any big flat areas. But if you do get big globs, and while it's wet, just shift it away to the edge and wick it off with your brush. So take your time here, cruise around and cover the entire miniature. Reason why I'm using a smaller brush than I normally would is that I do want a fair bit of control to this. And once that's had plenty of time to dry, go back to your original color, so Iraqi Sand in this case, but whatever you happen to be using for the base of the vehicle. And I'm going to dry brush this fairly generously back over all of the flat panels. I want to leave my shading intact, but I do want that original color to be a little more dominant. So I'm going to pass over these areas a few times just to brighten things up. As well, anywhere that you got any little tide marks, you can just go over those a little more strenuously and you'll get rid of those. Now after a couple of passes there, you're going to bring back that original color, but we still have loads of shading. We are going to do one last dry brush though, and this is more for some highlights. What I have is pale sand and a really big brush. I tend to find here that something relatively soft and flat is going to be the best choice, just so that I can approach the angles of this thing and find that a little easier to apply. So once I've made sure that there isn't very much on my brush at all, I'm just going to catch extreme edges and angles and corners and what have you all around the vehicle. Now this will dry a little bit darker than it looks going on. So once you've gone around once, give it a couple of minutes to dry and then see if you want to come back, give it a second pass to get a slightly sharper edge to these things. And there's the painted core of the vehicle. Now from here, it doesn't matter too much whether you go on to painting the wheels and the weapons or applying the decals now as I'm going to do. But if you do, remember that you want to apply the decals before you do any weathering. So that's what I'm going to do now. Now while those dry, we can get on to painting the last couple of details on the vehicle. And honestly, there's not really a huge number of these. What I'm going to use for the black is actually German grey. Now we're going to use this to paint in both the tires and the weapons mounts in the turret. So what I've got is some packing foam, and I've torn up the edges so that it's nice and rough. What we'll do is dab on a little bit of black grey to the edges and anywhere that we want to simulate the paint being chipped away. Now this will seem quite extreme going on, but you can be fairly generous with this. Just try and concentrate over areas where you'd expect to see a bit of crew movement. So over the back hatches, on the turret as well, of course, you want to make sure that you're getting the grenade meshing. Have a bit of fun with this, because this is where that Panzer Grey from the primer, supposedly, is going to show through. Now that's almost everything we need to do. Like I said, it's actually kind of hard to go overboard with this, and depending on how long you want this to look as though it's been in the field, you can really go to town with adding that chipping. I think it looks cool. It's a lot of fun. The last couple of things to do really, I have here beige brown, and we're going to paint in the wooden handle on the shovel here. And now grab yourself a pencil. What I've got here, this is a B. I would suggest a 2B is probably going to be better. You want a little bit softer. What I'm going to do is just rub it along the edges where we've done some of our grey chipping, so that it looks as though a little bit of the metal underneath is now starting to show as well. You don't need to go mad with this. Just a little brushing along the edges and you'll get a neat silver line. You can also use this to very quickly brush along the top of the autocannon and get a nice straight silver line as you highlight there. And now comes the fun part. What I've got is 1 part dark sand to about 5 parts water. You really want to thin this down until it looks kind of similar to a shade. It's going to go really chalky and awful when we apply it, so trust me when I say keep the faith here. What you want to do is apply this into areas where sand would collect, and it's going to look a little weird going on, but man, sand gets everywhere. So what you can do is lay it down and then dab it with your finger to get a slightly weirder pattern, but into recesses and such like that, you really want to spend a second to paint it in and make it look as though it's gathering. Any flat areas like this, you're going to see a fair bit of sand collect in those recesses. So paint this around, and just bear in mind that it is going to go a little chalky, which is ideal. We do want that. Now while that's drying, I think you'll get a slightly better look for what it's going to look like when this is all finished. And what you can do before this is completely dry is just lick the tip of your finger and run it around the outside of the wheels just to smudge some of that dust in real good. So all that remains, once this is thoroughly dried, is to take it outside and hit it with a matte varnish. Let's get a look at what this looks like when it is all complete. And there at last, our Deutsche Afrika Korps vehicle is complete. And the important thing really is to have fun with the weathering stage. You can't really go overboard, whether it's with the paint chipping or with the dust effects. And in particular, don't be afraid to get in there with your finger and smear things around. The less orderly and planned out it looks, the more realistic it's going to look. And the end result, I think, I'm going to be happy to put onto the table. So, as always, thank you very much to Exit 23 Games for the light and sound equipment, as well as all of the wonderful patrons who are keeping me ticking in paints and glue, including my producers, Alan Nuttall, Kyrie Crawford, Andrew, Rod, and Jimmy. Your support means the world, folks. Any questions or anything, feel free to drop them in the old comment box below. My Twitter and Instagram are both linked there too. So, thank you very much for your time, one and all, and you all enjoy the rest of your day.